Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be your host today on Archery Talk 101. What we're going to cover today is what to do when you're shooting and it starts raining. Now, how to deal with rainy conditions. To start with, if you can avoid being in the rain, avoid it, because it's just not as much fun to shoot in the rain. Uh, the thing you have to worry about is not really your equipment getting wet, because your bow's going to handle being wet, not a problem. Your string, as long as you've been waxing it, it's not going to have any problem with getting wet. Your arrows, if they're flushed with veins, are not going to have a problem getting wet. Now feathers, that's a little different story. The feathers, as they get wet, they kind of shrivel up. Uh, it doesn't wreck them. This is later out, you can straighten them back out, not a problem. You can always steam them to get them back in original shape. It's the biggest problem you have is when you're out shooting in the rain, you get done shooting, you put your bow in your bow case, you come home, you leave it in the bow case, and it sits. What's going to happen is all that moisture that's on it going to stay in there, and you're going to start getting some rust on parts, metal parts. The same thing can happen when you're shooting in the cold. Now, I'm from Nebraska, so we hunt in the wintertime. Our deer season, September through January, and it's cold. And what happens when your bow is cold, when you're out hunting, you put it in your bow case, you get home, you leave it in there. The same thing can happen to it as well. So when you get home after you've been shooting in the rain, just dry it off. Leave it sit out in the air by itself. Leave your case open because there's going to be moisture in your case as well. Leave it sitting out till it dries and it acclimates to room temperature. Put it back in your bow case, not a problem. The best way, of course, is to always throw your bow outside the bow case, but not always possible because if you don't have a good place to store them, you got to put them someplace to keep them safe. And in a bow case is generally the safest place, especially if it's a hard case. And the soft case do provide protection, but not quite as much. So now let's get into what do you do when you're shooting. Some of the problems are out in the rain. If it's a light mist, really not too much to worry about. If you're wearing glasses or you have glasses on, or you're wearing safety glasses or anything on that, you're going to have moisture getting on your lenses, and then it can interfere with your vision through your peep and seeing your sights. As the rain gets heavier and heavier, it's going to be harder and harder to see your target to a point where it's really pouring down. There's not going to be very good visibility, and you're going to have all this rain getting on your arrows as they're flying. Now, if you see anybody shoot an arrow that has got moisture on it, you'll see when you shoot this big old mist of all this water get dispersed off the shaft. So now then, as your arrow is flying, if it's veins, it's not going to collect as much moisture. So, but you're going to still have a little bit of resistance in going through that. At 20 yards, you're going to notice it. Probably not. You're not going to notice any difference there. So what you want to do is, think about that as you're doing your shooting and you're in the rain. Now, last time in the rain, you're going to have a little bit of wind to deal with as well. So now you have to deal with not only the rain adding weight to your arrow as it's going through the air. Now, granted, it's going to drop on there and then, just blow right off, but you're going to have the rain coming down and hitting it, which can affect it. If you're doing long range shooting, you're going to notice that. At your 20 yards, it's not spending enough time. You're not going to worry about it too much, at 20 yards or less. But that's something you have to think about. Now, if you're shooting feathers, now then you have to worry about how do I keep my feathers dry until I shoot? Well, if you have a quiver, you can always cover them up. And it's like if you're, in a hunting situation is most likely when you're going to be caught in the rain, because it can be nice cloudy overcast, doesn't start raining on you. And in a light mist, I've hunted in a light mist. The only problem you have is you have to realize that any blood trail you might have is going to get washed away really quick. So then you're tracking them down into mud prints. So that's something you have to think about too, is where they're going to run and will you be able to track the deer or whatever the animal is. Now, if you're out 3D shooting, you don't have to worry about the targets moving. You just have to worry about, the visibility to them. So that's something you have to think about when you're out shooting. But the biggest thing to remember is dry your equipment off, let it come to room temperature before you put it away. Nothing's going to get hurt on your bow. The biggest problem you're going to have is dealing with yourself getting wet. If you have a rain suit on, then you're okay. So you're going to stay dry. It's just kind of miserable shooting when you're getting soaking wet from shooting. So that's something you want to think about, and just keep that in mind when you're out. If you're going to hunt in the rain or shoot in the rain, that you will have a few little things that you'll have to take care of in there, and just maintaining your bow. And wax your strings helps against that, and also wearing your strings out. So that's one of the things to think about. Once again, this is Roy Ketchbury here from Archery Talk 101. If you want to get more information, I'll leave a link in the description below to the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, as well as the archerytalk101.com website. We can get more information there. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.